You're now live.
We are now live. We are here, but I do not see Commissioner Walk. Come on, that sounds good. Nope, he is not. There we go. There's Commissioner Walk. Good. Thank you and welcome. And Senator Sirotkin has rejoined us, so we are all here. Commissioner, welcome to the committee. And we're looking at S1, which is the renewal or relicensing of Rygate. And questions have come up, and I believe the committee has received things from Dylan Zwicky on environmental testing, but the question has come up about air quality and just wanted to touch base with you and see what are the requirements, how is this plant doing?
Sure. So I read the written testimony you'd received, or the input you'd received from the outside organization calling into question some of the environmental concerns around Rygate. We obviously take all of that information very seriously. Sorry, for the record, Peter Walk, Commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. We take those matters very seriously. This is a facility from so I'll separate out two issues. We have the sort of the regulation of emissions from the plant, and typically by emissions I mean particulate matter, NOx, other chemicals that are part of the burning of anything. We regulate that heavily. They, in fact, as part of their previous PPA adjustment, were required to lower certain levels. We take those matters seriously. The burning of any fuel does create emissions, and the burning of wood, it does as well. But we regulate to address those issues. And so, having looked through that document, the information you received, I don't maintain the same concerns that were raised. There are obviously issues with any facility, but we feel that one in particular is one that we have a good handle on. And then the second question was about greenhouse gas emissions, and greenhouse gas emissions from the burning of wood is a complicated calculation. As part of the work that went into the initial inventory, greenhouse gas emissions inventory for the state of Vermont, it was decided to exclude the burning of wood, the CO2 from the burning of wood from greenhouse gas calculations. We do account for methane and a couple other greenhouse gases that are released as part of the burning of wood from our calculations, because it was seen to be a decrease in the overall sequestration or storage of new carbon in our forests. And so it would have been a bit of a double counting if we were both counting the decrease in sequestration and the increase in emissions. We do publish what in greenhouse gas emissions inventory, what those emissions would look like if we did include those numbers, so that everybody has that information. But that was the decision that was made and that we've been continuing with to this point. And that was made in the late 2000s.
Okay. Senator Pearson.
So
what decision was made in the late 2000s?
Senator McDonald, Senator Pearson has the floor.
No, it's
Not Senator Pearson has the floor. Then you can ask. Okay.
Senator McDonald was just trying to understand the last point I think the commissioner made.
And understand its vocabulary.
So in as part of Madam Chair, whatever you would like me to do, I'm happy to answer whatever question is on.
You can, I guess they want you to explain your vocabulary in your last statement. I'm not sure.
Sure, as part of you'll forgive me if I can't quite recall whether it was a council or commission in the Douglas administration that looked at, was the first time we had looked at our greenhouse gas emissions, hired a consultant to advise on how we should calculate those emissions. And that has formed the basis for our annual greenhouse gas emissions inventory, which the DEC publishes every year, that shows where we are to this point, or based on the data that we have. As I've said in other committees, and probably not here, that inventory has a time lag associated with it because of the outside data sources that we rely on to publish that inventory. And so we are about to publish through 2017, but we do have some of the data that helps us see kind of what 2019 or 2018, 2019, and maybe even a little bit of 2020 says about where things are headed. So in our previous report, which we issued around this time last year, up through 2016, we had some data for 2017 and 2018 included. So
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'm now totally confused. Senator Pearson.
Well, I does DEC, I'm thinking back to testimony we had a couple of years ago in Senate Ag about advanced wood heat. And basically a lot of technology that's used in Europe is not available for heat furnaces, wood furnaces in Vermont, because DEC doesn't permit, doesn't like the particular, I don't know what, but doesn't, the air quality is not, standard is not tough enough. And so, which makes me ask, does DEC permit Rygate and McNeil for that matter, or is
Yes.
it okay? And so the burning of wood chips at Rygate is cleaner than the advanced wood furnaces that we've been hearing.
So I understand the question, that we're conflating a bit of issues here. There's a pretty significant difference between a power generation facility, which has a large stack that can send the particulate matter up in the air, that it spreads out enough that it's less of a challenge. That's sort of what we see with Rygate or McNeil. Those are heavily regulated. They have sort of emissions control technology within those stacks. They are heavily regulated in that way. The burning of wood in other ways for residential, commercial, school buildings, et cetera, is a slightly different matter. What we were talking about with the issues with certification had to do with a gap in EPA regulation that we were trying to figure out how to cover within the state of Vermont on sort of medium-sized units, and we're still working to work through that process so that we can make sure that the clean items are available for sale in the state of Vermont. So there are two separate issues. Just want to make sure we're all clear there.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Burning plant fall. It's not as big as Rygate or McNeil, but it's a lot bigger than the school or the fire station.
Madam Chair, I didn't hear what facility you were discussing.
The state wood chip.
I did not come prepared with the permit information on the state facility. I'm happy to gather that and bring it back.
Okay, now I was just wondering, is it considered a large plant like Rygate, or is it more?
It is not nearly on the scale of Rygate, certainly, but it is a larger facility than most.
Okay.
Certainly, given the number it serves. And the
Found
difference,
that, yeah, the truckloads that get burned a day.
yeah, and it's all, it is there is a question that one of the conversations that comes up is about the sort of overall efficiency of different units. It matters whether you're using it for heat or for producing electricity, as the production of electricity at Ragged and others requires the production of steam that then gets put through a turbine. So there's a loss of efficiency in converting it into electricity, where the Montpelier facility is creating steam for use in the heating.
For heat, okay, it's a heat only. Okay. Other questions? So I'm not seeing any. Basically, Sandra Bray has a question.
Well, just one quick check-in. So Commissioner Walk, I think it was, I don't know, almost 2 years ago in Senate Natural, the second half of a biennium, that we worked with DEC on figuring a path out to let advanced wood heat at that sort of large residential, smaller commercial scale works get permitted again. And my impression was that had all happened. Does that match your impression as well?
We still have some work to do, frankly. You created an interim solution that has helped provide some space. It's not as simple as we'd like it to be, and we're working through it. And frankly, I don't want to blame all things on the pandemic, but we've had other priorities to focus on, and so we do need to get back to that. And I'll get you an update as to where we stand there, so we can bring that answer to you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, you did say in your answer to Senator Pearson that the DEC does permit the Rygate facility. Are there special provisions as a condition of that permit that that would address the emissions from the plant? And the second part of my question is, are there provisions in the bill that are, I guess what I'm looking for is some kind of like boots and suspenders, as we love to say in this virtual building, to make sure that if we're going to do this for the next 10 years and spend this amount of money, or have ratepayers spend this amount of money, that we can have some kind of assurances that the plant is as environmentally sound as possible. So
I will say, so the first, so when I was asked to come testify, the first thing that I did was ask the head of our air quality permitting division or program, asked him where we stand on these issues and what our general impression of the air quality specifically permit was for the Rygate facility. And his impression was that based on where things stand, the changes that were made as part of the 2012-ish PPA update, that his team was very comfortable with the permit. And so these are the ones that directly regulate. These are the people that directly regulate these issues, and that was their feedback. So happy to have Doug Elliott come in and talk to you all about that if you'd like more detail, but that was his direct impression.
I guess I wonder how he defines comfortable. We may all have different definitions of comfortable, but I appreciate that, but more details would be helpful, just to set my mind at ease anyway.
Okay.
That we're doing everything we can.
Senator, did you see the Dylan Sawicki did supply us, and I think it went out to all of you. If not, I'll get it out with all the test data for the testing and the particulate matter, and we had all of that. So I'm pretty sure it's online if it didn't get emailed to you directly, but we do have a bunch of background information on the testing that's been done and the results.
Yeah, I have the email from Dylan, and that's great. He sent it this afternoon. I haven't had a chance to go through it all, but he is a lobbyist for the firm that's
right. But this is an EPA check sheet. It's not his opinion. It's a measurement sheet, a test result sheet. So you can take a look at that. And then I don't know if we need any more information, but if you do, let me know and we'll find out. Senator Bray, did I?
Yeah, I just wanted to,
I'm sorry,
you
I
have
had
more?
a second
Sorry.
question that the commissioner didn't get a chance to answer about the specific provisions in the bill and whether there were anything you would recommend as sort of boots and suspenders.
At this point, there's not anything additional that I would recommend. I'm happy to, I actually have, Doug Elliott is following along at home and sending me some emails as he watches the YouTube stream. If you would like him to join now, I'm happy to have him join us. He can provide you with some of this information. He does say that they have good emissions limits and testing requirements now as part of their permit. That's how we evaluate whether or not they are meeting their emissions limit. It's not a brand new facility, so it doesn't have some of the newer technology, but that's the same with all of our existing facilities.
Have him join, but without Faith, I'm not sure who knows how to do that.
I think I can send him the link.
Would you like to have him?
As long as Faith will let him in, then I think we'll.
Well, I think it's Senator Pearson who will let him in, so I think we're okay.
All right, hold on one second. Let me send this link quickly.
Senator McDonald, do you have a question?
I do. I just, but I, in a comment, the last time, the first 20 years that this plant operated, when those 20 years were done, there was a concern about the pollution issues. And there were some changes to the plant that made it not as bad as it used to be. And now it's 20 years later. This is coming up on 40 years on the plant. And I guess one of my questions would be, what is this measured by federal standards? Or when we say we're comfortable, that's because Vermont has standards in statute, and we might take a look at those. But federal standards are not the same as they were 4 years ago for polluting for enterprises that put out smoke and particulates. But the question that still remains is how economically, for a plant that produces electricity, how does the witness explain the justification for operating a plant that is much more expensive than the electricity that could be bought from cleaner plants and at lower prices by what, $10 million?
Sure, I would not be comfortable weighing in on the economics of
Yeah,
this.
this is not,
Well, we're the Economic Committee, Natural Resources is the pollutant committee, so.
yes. So, and we've got people coming in to talk to us about the economic impact, but this is
Thank you.
on, and I thought it was 10 years ago that the
Yes,
scrubbers, I believe they were called, went on, but Doug Elliott is with us. So Doug, what can you tell us about Rygate? Define comfortable.
Madam Chair, you're correct about the numbers, and I was wrong about the number
It
of
was
years.
10, it was
Yes,
10
yeah,
years.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah. And this is a 10-year extension, not 20.
Yep, yep.
That's been requested. Okay.
you. Yes. Yep.
So Doug, if you unmute yourself, there you go. The floor is yours.
All right, got it.
Correct about the numbers, and I was wrong.
Okay, I'm
It was
getting,
10 years.
Thank you.
okay, I need someone,
This is a 10-year extension, not 20.
I think, Doug, we need you to stop
Request.
YouTube video.
oh yeah, you've got to get off of YouTube.
So Doug, if
Oh,
you
YouTube is-
unmute yourself, no.
Can you hear me?
All right, got it.
Kind
Okay,
of a day off his field, actually.
okay, I need someone,
we can hear you.
Am
but
I-
your YouTube is.
and we can
still
hear
playing.
us.
Okay, I can hear you folks.
Oh, yeah, you've got to get off of YouTube. So Doug, if you unmute yourself,
Prairie Jaka.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
enough
When we
Okay,
first
that's
work better?
good. No more feedback.
Okay.
All right. Nothing like
All right,
hearing
so,
yourself talking back.
So Commissioner Walk covered it pretty well. The plant it's not a new plant, but it has very good emission controls for the age of the plant. It wouldn't be that much different today for a new plant. There are a couple options we might want to look at if we could. I'm not sure they're necessarily technically feasible for a plant of that age, but you know, a new plant built today of that size would probably have an oxidation catalyst that would help reduce some of the other emissions. We could look at how much that might cost and whether it's technically feasible or not. Back in 2012, when the plant got its first contract extension, they had to add additional NOx emission controls, and that was in order to qualify for the rec markets in southern New England. And those rec markets did not require the oxidation catalyst that we would probably be looking at for a new plant today.
Okay.
And Doug, there was a question about whether these are our emission standards versus EPA. Can you answer some of those questions?
Sure. This plant is large enough that it's considered a federal Title V facility. So it's a state permit, but it's got federal oversight. And the emission limits are established by us, but looked at by EPA as well. And the emission limits they're not directly from regulations. It's a case-by-case review where you look at that type of plant and say, what is it capable of doing? And that changes with time. So new plants are held usually to more stringent standards than older plants. That being said, this plant was pretty state of the art when it was built in '92 or so, and it's a pretty good plant from an air pollution standpoint.
Compared to
other wood energy plants. New Hampshire put a bunch of them in that rough same time frame. Obviously not compared to a natural gas-fired plant. Those plants are going to be much more cleaner and much more efficient. But as far as wood energy goes, they've got some pretty good emission controls on it. So as Mr. Walk indicated, the difference between one of these plants, one of these large plants like Rygate or McNeil versus smaller wood boilers, the emission limits are much tighter. The overall pollution is greater because the units are so much bigger and they run so much more. But from a concentration standpoint, the emission limits are pretty good for these plants.
Okay. Senator Bray.
I just have a question. One of the things we were talking about was if we were supporting the woodshed, perhaps through something else like and I know that these things don't have to be mutually exclusive, but the production of wood pellets to support that woodshed. And then if you're using those pellets in advanced wood heat systems, I'm just wondering about I'm guessing the emissions can you compare and contrast those emissions? I mean, when you have a big plant, you can do pretty sophisticated emissions control, right? That you can't do on the small scale.
Absolutely. The level of emissions from the larger plants on a concentration basis are going to be much better than you're going to get from smaller scale combustion units. The boilers are just bigger and they burn hotter and they just get much better combustion than you'll get from the smaller systems. Now, some of the smaller systems are coming, lately they've come with pretty advanced emission control technologies on them. I'm talking like the state wood boiler system in Montpelier and Waterbury. Those size systems have been having advanced particulate matter controls for several years now. When you start getting down into the outdoor wood boiler size units, not so much.
Okay.
The economies of scale just aren't there.
Right. How about the advanced, the ones I happen to know about are, I think they're all from Germany, advanced wood heat systems for the residential or smaller commercial scale, mid-commercial scale. I don't know how those compare. I'm just trying to make sure that if we're looking to support a choice, that we're not actually shooting ourselves in the foot by supporting a choice that results in significantly more emissions.
Yeah, those types of units would be better, but they're still not going to be, at the level of control that you can get with a larger centralized plant. And as Mr. Walk alluded to, the Rygate plant, one of its issues is the efficiency. When you're trying to burn wood to make steam, to make electricity, you're going to be in the 25% efficient range. It's not very good. But then again, steam to electricity for any type of fuel is not really that good. Might be 30% on some other units. Wood is a little worse than others. But when you burn it for space heating, so if you're burning it to make steam for a paper mill dryer or to heat a school or something, your efficiencies bump up to like 80% because you're not trying to convert that heat to mechanical energy.
So if they put in the shrimp farm they're investigating, I must admit Vermont shrimp is an intriguing thought, that would up their efficiency because they would be using that steam as heat.
Right. You'd use some of that leftover steam to recover some of the heat out of it. That being said, with power plants, when you convert steam to electricity, you end up with a very large amount of low temperature water. It's really hard to use it. So it's not that you're never going to bump the efficiency up to you would if you were using it for space heating.
Okay, and we've talked about wood pellets. I know nothing about how wood pellets are made, but I know we've heard that the efficiency is that control isn't as great. In the manufacture of wood pellets, is there any kind of an environmental issue? I mean, in the process, I've heard, everyone was buying bamboo flooring and then it was saying, well, the process of making it, it's highly toxic.
Yeah, the making of wood pellets on a small scale tends to be relatively polluting from an air pollution standpoint. You get into some of the larger plants down south that make 400, 500 plus thousand tons, and they can afford the added emission controls that make them a little bit more reasonable. At the scale we have in Vermont, we can deal with a few of those plants here and there, but they're limited. There'll be 15 to 20,000 tons per year of pellets before they start tripping some significant air pollution thresholds.
But as a per capita thing, they're not particularly clean.
Correct.
Okay. Senator Bray.
I'm just wondering if there's a best of both worlds thing where that waste heat could be used. I don't know how much heat there is if it's significant enough to run a pellet dryer, for instance.
I couldn't say for sure, but usually the term waste heat from a steam to electric power plant, it's not recoverable. The McNeil plant that's been talking about using their waste heat to do district heating, it's not really the waste heat from the power generation. They're taking steam ahead of the power, so it reduces the amount of power you make, and you're using that steam instead for district heating. You're not really recovering a lot. Now, you can try to recover some from the stack, and I think McNeil was probably looking at that as well. But
okay, so anyway, I don't know anything about the technical feasibility. So sounds like you're saying you'd have to take it off. You'd have to reduce power in order to get heat that was sufficient enough to couple it to another operation that needed to do drying, for instance.
Most likely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're trying to do a greenhouse or something like that. Maybe shrimp farm. That's the first I've heard of that, where they just.
That's what came up the other day. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, maybe something like that would be able to recover that 90 to 100 degree water. There's not enough temperature in it to do much useful. You got to either pull more heat out of the stack or take it away from the power production.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Hardy, and then I'm going to have to start wrapping this up because Senator Saratkin and I have another meeting.
Okay. Mr. Elliott, thank you so much. You've been very helpful. I appreciate the specifics. You probably have not looked at the bill. I don't know if you have or talked about it with the commissioner, but I asked him this question. And I'll ask you if there are any provisions that you think would be helpful to include in the bill to better ensure the efficiency or emissions control if we're going to sign on to some kind of 10-year deal. Is there anything from an environmental protection perspective that you would recommend?
I would say there is one device we would like to consider. I don't know if it's technically feasible on that particular plant or not, but an oxidation catalyst is for the Beaver Wood facility and the North Springfield project that we permitted, and then they never got their public service permits. But we had that requirement on those plants. But those were brand new plants being built specifically, to accommodate that type of device. So I'm not sure that's feasible.
I thought I heard a $10 million price attached to the last one. That may have just been any idea what kind of pricing we're talking about with the new?
I wouldn't.
I'm sure that's going to get passed on to ratepayers.
Yeah. I wouldn't say 10 million is out of the question. I think that would probably be the upper side, but I'd have to do some research.
But it's not cheap.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that strikes me as too much, but
No, this was for the last set of scrubbers that went on.
okay, for the nitrogen oxides,
Yeah.
in order to meet the rec market for,
Yeah, I thought I'd heard that number thrown out, so said I'd
and
check it.
again, in that case, they were able to qualify for the recs and help recover that cost.
Right.
There would be no such recovery for this additional device that we would look at.
Okay.
It'd be just cost.
All right. Okay, committee, any other questions? If not, that's it for today. I'm not sure who's in charge now. I think it's Senator Hardy that's going to take us off live.